Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be going through my top 5 ranking of my favorite characters from the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. So part of this is because I realized that for how much I love the Cosmere and Stormlight Archive in particular, I haven't done any dedicated videos on the Stormlight Archive. I was looking at my videos thinking like, why have I not made content about this series that I love so much? So I know that the characters are a huge reason of why so many people connect with these books and love them. And so I just wanted to dive into my favorites and why I love them. Hi guys, I realized when I was filming my Stormlight characters video earlier today, I did forget to put a disclaimer about spoilers at the start, so I'm just gonna insert this in because I do go into spoilers. I was not making this video spoiler free, so if you have not read through to Rhythm of War, proceed at your own risk. I do talk about events all the way through Rhythm of War, but I hope that you enjoy the video. So let's get back to Other Grace. So I will say that when I started conceptualizing this video, I thought that it was going to be easier to choose, but what I've realized throughout this process is that there are literally just so many Stormlight characters that I love that it was honestly very hard to make the decision. But I am going to start with a few honorable mentions, and then I will get into the list from 5 to 1. So the honorable mentions are going to be Syl and Pattern, because they're my 2 favorite Spren, and then we have Adolin, Renarin, and Wit. So I could say a whole bunch about each of those characters, but I won't because I will spend my time on my actual top 5, but I did want them to be mentioned because Syl, Pattern, Adolin, Renarin, and Wit, they still deserve the love. They're just not in the top 5. Okay, so at spot number 5, I have Yazna Colon, and spot number 5 was kind of hard for me to narrow down, but Yazna edges it out just because I think that she is such an interesting, well-rounded character. I love the fact that she is a scholar and she has really incongruous religious views for living in such a religious society. So I love the fact that right from the start she's considered a heretic. She's essentially an atheist in this world, and she's very logically driven. She's driven by questions and research, and that type of character is extremely compelling to me to read about. And then not to mention that Yazna also provides some great asexual representation, and her growing relationship with Wit is like a great example of that. It's really cool to watch them together and their dynamics, and Yazna is also just a total badass. Like, she is really ruthless, and whether you agree with her or not, I feel like you have to respect her for it. Like when she's teaching Shalon and she eviscerates like 4 guys just like that, because that's just who Yazna is. Like, she might reflect later and decide that her decision was wrong, but she's definitely not going to waffle in the moment. She is going to do the thing. And I just love her like conviction of character and how strong of a character she is. So coming in at number 4 on the list, I have Shalon Davar. And Shalon is a character that I know a lot of people are mixed on, and obviously from her placement here, I still really like her, but she's not as high, like she's not my favorite. I feel like a lot of people are really split on her, whereas I fall somewhere in the middle, because I really like that when we meet Shalon, she is having a personal struggle between like whether to be a thief, because that is her original goal when she meets Yazna and studies under her, is to steal her soulcaster, but Shalon like genuinely enjoys being a scholar and studying under Yazna. And so I like how we see her like try and balance both of those things. She knows that she can't have it both ways, but like even through her progression throughout the books, I feel like she is a scholar at heart because she is still driven by questions, and as she gets involved even with like her personalities and the ghost bloods, she's driven to uncover the mysteries, and that is still what like is kind of the base of her character. So I really like how compelling she is to follow and how she creates, obviously she suffers from dissociative identity disorder, but the fact that she creates identities that can do different things for her, I feel like is really a culmination of her life up to that point where she was struggling to be all of the things, and then she just decides that this is the way that she can deal with it. But Shalon, also a big sticking point I think for people with Shalon is also her humor, and her humor sometimes hits for me and sometimes doesn't. So I do find Shalon funny sometimes because I am the person who makes like the stupidest joke that you've ever heard in your life and everybody tells me to get out. So sometimes I find her humor really funny, but then again, sometimes like I'm the person groaning and being like, no, you get out. But I think that one of the things that makes Shalon like among my favorite characters is the intersection of like her past with who she is now. Like, I remember reading Words of Radiance, and Words of Radiance remains my favorite of the 4 books. And that's not only because of what was happening in the present day, it was also because of what we were uncovering with Shalon's past. She is so interesting, and a lot of it she doesn't even remember, or she's starting to. But like, I just can't believe, it's hard to reconcile the two people, the person that like was in her past and the person that she is, and I think that that's what she struggles with as well. So she's just so interesting, and I'm looking forward to, like, after where we left her at the end of Rhythm of War, with her actually making like what appears to be some progress in her ideals and in her like self-development. I'm really, really excited to see where she continues to go. Coming in at number 3 on my list, I have Nivani Colin, and I'm not sure whether this is going to be a popular choice or not, but I think that a lot of people either really, really liked the science aspects of Rhythm of War, or they were bored to tears by them. Or maybe not bored to tears, but were like, what is this? I didn't come read this fantasy book for like a research science lesson or a lesson in physics and sound. But I think that if you did like it, I'm probably going to be among you where Rhythm of War really shot Nivani up my favorites list. I always liked her, but she was very much more of a fringe character before, where she was like a strong woman and she was like still a scholar, still very smart, still involved in like the innovation that was going on in the camps and their technologies and things. Like, she's always been very interesting. And then of course her relationship with Dalinar and her relationship with the rest of the Colons, like, I like watching all of that, but again, like, the parts in Rhythm of War and her journey during Rhythm of War are what really put her here for me, because I loved the science stuff and I loved watching her be driven by, you can see a pattern with the female characters that I love here, because they're scholars driven by questions, and Nivani was discovering, like, she was discovering magic science. Like, she is innovating and doing research on how the in-world magic actually works, and I could not like get enough of it. I thought it was really cool how he used the principles of real sound physics but put a twist on them where obviously things are going to work different here, and I loved all of those parts. But even like above and beyond that, Nivani's relationship with Raboniel in this final entry, or not final, but most recent entry, they have some of my favorite interactions to read, and Nivani is just such a badass, and her ending, her bond that she formed at the end of Rhythm of War, and her iconic line. So I love Nivani now, and I really hope that she continues to have like a decent role, because I really enjoyed her when she did. Now, I said that I had trouble choosing these characters, and that is true because there are so many great characters that I want to mention, but for the top 2 spots, probably nobody is going to be shocked by who occupies these spots, and these 2 were not super hard for me to choose, because both of these are my two favorite characters in the series. And so number 2 is Dalinar Colin. And I mean, we will get to number 1. You know, you guys pretty much know who number 1 is, but we will talk about Dalinar. So Dalinar has been a presence throughout the entire series, and his journey has been one of the most interesting, because when we first meet him in Way of Kings, he is like a very honorable man. His expectations and standards are kind of unconventional. Like, he has the only organized camp in all of the Alethi war camps, and like, he has high expectations of his son, things like that. Like, he is very honorable, but you also have the fact that, for one, he's having visions that he doesn't know whether they're real or not, so you have that wrinkle. But you also have a hint of people kind of saying that this isn't who Dalinar always was, so you get that hint of like what his past was, like you want to know what it was. And he has like a very interesting story throughout Way of Kings, and then obviously there's the culmination where like he's so honorable that like he will trade a shard blade for like Bridge 4 and the slaves, and Kaladin goes back to get him, and like Kaladin and Dalinar's relationship is unreal. But I love Dalinar in that book, and then he just continues to grow from there. And I personally think that despite it not being my favorite book, Oathbringer has the best climax in the entire series, and it's because of Dalinar. Because at this point, through his flashback chapters in Oathbringer, we have learned about his past and the amount of like gruesome war, like that's contained in his past, and also the amount of tragedy, what happened to his wife. We finally know. We finally get to see him visit the Night Watcher and what happened there, and how Cultivation visited him and gave him his gift, his boon and his curse, and like we get all of that. And we get a much more full picture of who Dalinar is, because obviously Dalinar used to struggle a lot for a long time. He was not a good guy. He was warmongering, he was a conqueror, and if we were introduced to that character at the very, very start, we might not have liked him very much. We may have felt similar to him about how we feel about Sadeas, but we don't. We get introduced to him when he is an honorable man doing his best who doesn't actually remember these other parts of his life. And then at the climax of Oathbringer, we see him bringing it all together, no pun intended, but he's literally learning to reconcile who he is so that he can also then unify the nations of Roshar. And I love that character development for him. I love that arc, and I also love that analogy where he needs to do this himself because he needs to accept his pain but don't accept that you deserved it. Like, all of that. The end of Oathbringer has some of the best quotes in the entire series, and it's amazing. So obviously he still has a role in Rhythm of War because he is like the guy, but I'm very much looking forward to how things go in the 5th book after the deal that he has made with Odium, and things are getting very intense, but I won't go into that too much because I'm kind of just like talking about why I love Dalinar so much, and the bulk of that happens in the first 3 books. That really just like blows my mind. Okay, and at number 1 on my list, probably surprising precisely no one, is Kaladin Stormblessed. I know that this is a popular pick, but I believe he's a popular pick for a reason, and I agree. Like, you are correct, everyone that loves him. We are right. And obviously, the struggles with mental illness and the representations of mental illness in the Stormlight Archive are what a lot of people connect with, and that's a very important part of who these characters are and how they develop and like their actions and everything. And for me, the most like personal, raw story is Kaladin's struggle with depression, and I could see straight from the start of book 1 that I was going to relate to Kaladin. I think that the way that Brandon Sanderson writes it makes Kaladin so understandable, and like you can really just see into his experience. And a lot of aspects of his emotional journey are so relatable, whether you have depression or not. And I think that that's why a lot of people can relate to Kaladin, although I know that some people just think that he is like mopey and whiny, and it hurts me when I hear people think that. But I think that it does depend on who you are, your life experiences, to determine how well you relate to Kaladin. And so related to Kaladin's struggle with depression, we have his overall like character arc in terms of his situation in life. And so during The Way of Kings, we get a really interesting contrast because we get Kaladin's flashbacks where we can see that he grew up in like a loving home and his dad was training him to be a surgeon, and you want to know how he got from point A to point B essentially, because in the present day we're following Kaladin as a slave, and he is like literally right down in the mud at the bottom of the social hierarchy, and he's struggling, and they are not treated well, and this system is not built well. It's terrible. And you get to watch him go from like a surgeon's apprentice to a slave, and basically to building himself up until he becomes a radiant and becomes a higher position in society. But he doesn't lose himself. And he also, the thing that I like is that even when his position in society rises and he is like a more important person, he is leading ranks and leading like his windrunners into battle, his struggle with depression isn't gone. So it wasn't just because you can't just get better. And I like that that's explored, because whether he has like a quote unquote good life or not, whether he is a slave or whether he is a captain, he still has depression. So I really like how that's done with him. But I also have a soft spot for the trope where a character has some sort of secret identity or is secretly good at something, and Kaladin being this amazing spearman is that the right word? Kaladin's good with a spear. But the fact that Kaladin is an amazing fighter isn't exactly a secret to us, because we see it early on in the first book. But I like that it's kind of a hidden talent of his when he's with the bridge crews, and then he's teaching people to be like good fighters as well, and that's the start of his like windrunners. And the other thing I really like about Kaladin being such an amazing fighter is that it's a struggle within him that we explore throughout all 4 books, about how he has the compulsion to save everyone, but he is also one of the best people in the world at killing. And it's like, how do you reconcile those two things? And he struggles with that for a long time. And then the other thing that has kind of 2 sides of the same coin in Kaladin is that he does have his prejudices. He has his prejudices because of how him and his family have been treated at the hands of Light Eyes for their entire lives. But Kaladin is also extremely honorable and just a good man at heart. So like if somebody needs help, then he is still willing to help them. And that goes along kind of with his compulsion to save people, just because he has such a good heart underneath it all, and he will be like that. And finally, I feel like one of the more shallow reasons, but still super valid reasons that I love Kaladin is because he has some of the coolest fighting skills and some of the absolutely coolest and insane like battle sequences and fight scenes in the entire series. I love to watch, like for example in Words of Radiance, when Kaladin and Szeth go against each other. Those are some of my favorite scenes, and the Windrunner skills just in general are, I think, my favorite. But that could change, because I really like how they're developing the other Radiant skills and like coming up with ways in which those can be useful in creative ways. It's really cool. So it could be unseated maybe, but for now, I really like watching the Windrunners fight, and Kaladin is like the most skilled among them, so I absolutely love him. There are so many, I could probably talk about Kaladin forever. So I think I'm going to wrap it up. I hope that you enjoyed this. Let me know your ranking down in the comments, or whether you agree or disagree with me. I'm sure that there are going to be a lot of disagreements, but there are so many amazing characters in this series. So this is just my take on it, and honestly, my take could change, because when I was choosing these, every time I was like, oh, but does so-and-so deserve to be here? But honestly, Kaladin and Dalinar are pretty solid, and I'm just hoping that when we get book 5, these characters continue to grow on me even more, because I already do love them. And yeah, so again, let me know what you thought down in the comments. That is going to be it for this one. Like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content from me, and I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!